welcome back. Happy Tuesday. Thank you guys for tuning into me every single week. It blows my mind that anybody cares what I have to say, but I am so thankful for you guys showing up every week, giving me support, giving me energy. It really fills my heart. It emphasizes everything that I have been working for to build community, to put information out there, to empower people, to let you guys become more of yourselves. It is the best feeling. And speaking of things that I am thankful for, tickets to Sacred Spaces have opened up, which is very exciting. And so it's going to be a much smaller event this time. Hopefully that means more of you guys can make it and we can talk in person and I can catch up with people that I saw in the past couple ones and hopefully meet some more of you guys. And with that, I have opened up my readings in exchange for donations again. Now, I don't take paid readings. I don't take general bookings. So if you want a reading from me, this is the one and only way to do it. And it is for a limited time only. The way it works is you send me an email. I go through the emails in the order that I receive them. I do not guarantee that I will get to everybody, so you can send your donation after you get the reading back. So you send me an email, you send me a selfie, you tell me your goals, you tell me maybe the information that you're hoping to get. I can't guarantee I'm going to give you all of the answers you want, but I will do my best. And then I get to your email, I do the reading, I send you an email back, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it is exactly what you need to get you to your goals. Even if it's not the information that you are currently asking, hopefully it is the path that you need to take to get to where you want to be. There is a separate post that I made last week with all of the information, the email address, tips on how to take the picture, all of that good information. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments as well. For this week's video, I'm going to try to keep it on the shorter side, not just because the past few videos have been kind of long, but also because this topic is a little bit heavier. I want to talk about transcending duality. And this is something that I've mentioned before. This is something that I feel like everybody in their spiritual journey, in their shadow work journey, gets to a place where they have to ask themselves, is there really a good and evil? Is there really a right and wrong? And if you're not at that point yet, that's okay. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with whatever stage you are at. I am just saying that this is a really important topic that I want to emphasize why it's important on a spiritual realm, not just on like the human and the shadow work realm. So for the majority of this video, I'm going to focus only on spirit stuff, but I do want to give you one really powerful example that I always come back to in terms of applying this on a human sense, especially right now, especially in the political climate that we're at. And this is, again, my point of view, how I operate from where I stand, not just as a human, but as somebody who is trying to build a religious organization, trying to build an all-inclusive pagan temple. And the way that I have decided to keep my mindset so that I can be as welcoming and open to as many different types of people as possible, and why I've chosen that. And again, if this is not for you, that is completely okay. I am not calling you out. I am not saying you are wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. Again, we're transcending wrong and right. We're getting past that. I want to show you an example of how everything gets into shades of gray. And I also want to emphasize that we all have different roles to play within our spiritual journeys, within our own journeys, but just within our existence within the world as well, right? Like we're supposed to be different people. We're supposed to be our full authentic selves. And that is so important because that is what propels things forward. That is what keeps things moving. So let me give you an example. In many ways, my job, my role is to be a safe person. It's to be a person that people can come to and I can meet them with love, with understanding, and without judgment. However, you guys have heard me say before that we don't grow, we don't expand, we don't try to look past where we currently are unless we are uncomfortable. We have to be uncomfortable enough to want to make a change. We have to be uncomfortable enough to realize we need to make a change. And this means that, unfortunately, things usually have to get worse before they can get better. And you can look at the political climate right now and see the things getting worse before they get better. Please do not mistake me saying that we need to see things get worse before they can get better as me saying things that are happening are okay. There's absolutely things happening that are not okay. And they're not okay no matter how you spin it, right? But this is where I stand with it, okay? I personally believe that we cannot grow, we cannot have self-growth, we cannot have political growth. We can't grow until we are met with love. And a lot of us have never been met with love. A lot of us have no idea what that looks like. And so if we have no idea what being met with love looks like, we can't love ourselves. And if we don't have self-love, we are not going to feel safe enough to do the work. We're not going to feel supported enough to do the work. We're not going to be able to get rid of the blame and the guilt and the shame to do the work. And so I present with love. And I do that because I want to show people what it's like to have love, to be presented with love, to be presented with an understanding that has no blame, that gets rid of guilt, that gets rid of shame, that is rooted in a deep understanding and connection of the human experience. So, what does that actually look like in practice? What does that actually look like in the real world? Well, first and foremost, remember that my role, this is the important part, my role is the love, right? My role is the acceptance. My role is being a safe space for you to come and to discuss things and not feel judged, a safe space for you to come and to be presented with ideas that are perhaps outside of your normal line of thinking and be presented in them in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're a POS, a piece of shit for believing the way that you do, right? That's my role. However, there are people out there with the role of being that trigger. There are people out there with the role of making people uncomfortable. So let's say you happen across somebody who makes you uncomfortable, and we're just gonna pretend, right? Because our growth is in stages, okay? So we're just gonna pretend that you're at a stage where you're like self aware enough to be like, hey, why am I uncomfortable with this, right? And of course, if you are not at a stage where you're like self aware enough to be like, hey, why am I uncomfortable? That's okay, right? So I am just picking a spot in the middle for this example, but this can happen at any stage in growth. This can happen at any stage of life. And sidebar, real quick, you can have more than one role, right? Like you guys have heard me say that my existence makes people uncomfortable, and that's true. That's just me existing. My existence makes some people uncomfortable, right? Because we all at different stages of life we go through different stuff. So I am at a point where sometimes I'm the trigger, but I actively put my energy and my effort into being a safe landing space. And because I put so much effort and so much dedication into being a safe landing space, I hope that people feel comfortable enough to come to me and be like, Rebecca, how the fuck can you think this? Rebecca, how the fuck are you standing on that side of the line? I don't get it and I really want to know. Another sidebar, your safety is most important. And also, if you don't want to be an educational spot for people, you absolutely are not required to. Okay. I've chosen this. I have dedicated to being this. This is the role that I want to play. You absolutely don't have to. Okay. We all have different roles. I cannot stress that enough. So somebody comes to me and they're like, Rebecca, what the fuck? Here's the trick though. Typically when they come to me, it's less about them actually wanting to know my point of view. Sometimes it is, absolutely is. But oftentimes, if they're on an earlier stage of their own personal growth journey, it's less about them actually wanting to know my point of view and more about them wanting to be validated. Because here's the thing, if somebody wants to change their point of view, however, they have been met with nothing but hostility from the other side, it becomes very hard to feel like you're ever going to be accepted by that other side, which is key. Because here's the thing, people who have, let's say, political views that are so deeply embedded in their self identity, if they change their political views even a little bit, they risk being ostracized. They risk being basically shunned and blowing up their entire life. And I know that sounds dramatic. Rebecca, how can changing one teeny tiny political view blow up their entire life? No, it is not dramatic. It is a very big ask to ask somebody to change that first political view, because when they change one little thing, it opens the door to changing their entire mindset, to changing everything that they thought they knew. And I feel like deep down, we can feel that. Deep down, we know, because typically we have fear. We know that if we take that first step, it could snowball. And it could not only snowball into becoming a totally different person, but it could snowball into losing everything that you have ever known, all of the people, all of the understandings of the world, all the understandings of yourself, all the understandings of everything that you have ever been taught or come to know as your truth. That is not a little thing to ask. So if somebody comes to me and they're like, oh my God, Rebecca, what the fuck? And I say, oh my gosh, thank you for asking me that. Thank you for coming to me with that. I'm so glad that we can have this conversation. That opens the door, that offers a space that is not only safe, but says, if you do take that step, if you do start this snowball effect, if you do risk losing everything and everyone you ever knew to become more authentically who you want to be, there is a place for you still. There is a space for you with me in my community, no matter what. And again, that no matter what does not mean that I'm putting my personal safety or even my personal boundaries out the door. No, you can still have your personal safety. You should still have your boundaries. Just because you are a safe place doesn't mean you have to be, okay? And so my boundaries are my boundaries. And as long as you respect my lines, as long as you respect what I need from you in order to be a member of my community, you are allowed to not agree with me. You are allowed to have different views as long as we are all feeling safe, as long as we are all still feeling and having our needs being met in a way that is safe and, just a community for everybody. You don't have to agree with what I think. You don't have to agree with what I say. And there are times where people just are not a good fit for my community. For example, I am very busy, and there are people who just need that back and forth quick response at all hours of the night, and that is not me. I cannot offer that. That doesn't mean that I think those people are wrong. That doesn't mean that I think those people need to just go jump off a cliff. It means that it's not a good fit for me. But I still have love and I still have understanding for the stage in their journey or just what they're going through at this point in time. And this is where we come back to that idea of transcending duality, of getting out of that black and white mindset and seeing things in a really bizarre shades of gray. As much as I think that you're incorrect for believing that mixed race couples should not exist, I can still understand why you think that. I don't think that you're bad because you think that. I can understand how those ideas got in your head. I can understand why they got in your head. I can understand the history behind them. I can understand the cultural significance behind them. And I can understand the reason that you are holding on to that belief so tightly that oftentimes it comes out in anger. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to have a place in my life. In fact, it's probably a good idea if you don't have a place in my life. We're not a good fit. We're not going to be a good fit. I'm human and we can have problems, right? But I don't think that you are inherently bad for having those views. That's the difference here. That is the transcending duality. That is seeing things outside of good and bad. And that is understanding points of view from as many of those 360 angles as you can. So let's segue this into the spirit side of things. Now, let's take that transcending duality, that getting out of that good, bad, black, white mindset, and take it over into the spirit realm for a second. I want to tell you a story about a TikTok video that I made way back when I first got on TikTok. And this involves the sleep paralysis demons. Now, I am not saying that what I channeled was correct. I'm simply using this as an example. I don't actually know who's right and who's wrong. I'm simply sharing this is information that I channeled. And it's very possible that I channeled this information for the sake of being able to get to this transcending duality point, for the sake of looking at things from another point of view and expanding my understanding of the universe. And when I shared the information that I got through this meditation, I said, listen, this is just something that I got. I want to validate everybody's experiences with these sleep paralysis demons, because whether these sleep paralysis demons are good or bad, being in a paralysis but being conscious that you cannot move is a scary event. And so, good or bad, that fear needs to be validated. Things can be good and be motherfucking terrifying at the same time. And that is something that, again, transcends this good and bad, transcends this black and white, and sees things in this really complex 360 shades of gray. And please keep in mind that I posted this video years ago, so I'm kind of like paraphrasing all of this from my memory. But essentially, what I got in that meditation, the information that I got was the sleep paralysis demons were simply there to clean out old energy. And I say simply there as in like just a way of explaining it. Nothing simple about this, right? But essentially, what they were doing is they were coming and they were putting you in a state of paralysis so that you could not move, so that they could sort of scan and search your energy and pull out things that needed to go, pull out energy that needed to go, pull out whatever needed to leave. But they needed you to stay very, very still. And for some reason, they perhaps needed you to be in this state of like semi-consciousness between human and astral or human and spirit or whatever in order to get their job done, right? So what What if this very scary sleep paralysis demon that everybody just always assumes is quote unquote bad is actually trying to help you? What if this bad being has been labeled all of these terrible things, was actually trying to get you to your goals, was actually trying to remove old things, was actually trying to help you out in the end? What if? What if? And that what if can be so important because, as you guys hear me say all the time, spirit cannot tell you information if you think you already know. Spirit cannot tell you information if there is no room in your brain for that information. If you think you know, if you know for sure that sleep paralysis demons are evil, there is no room in your brain. It's going to be very, very difficult for spirit to try to convince you otherwise. And it's going to be very, very difficult for you and for spirit to get to a place where you feel safe enough and feel calm enough and still feel connected enough without being triggered to get an opposing view, to get this what if 360, not black and white shades of gray information. It's very, very hard for spirit or human or anybody to offer a different way of thinking, to offer a different way of seeing if you are so dead set that you already know. I want to use the rest of our time on this video to give you some examples of things that I have come across in my spiritual journey that expanded the way that I saw things, that expanded my black and white view of the way that things worked into shades of gray. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have self-love, to not have shame and guilt and all of these other really heavy emotions about the way that we did see things. Because if we are carrying guilt about, oh, I can't believe I used to believe that, I can't believe I used to hang out with those people, we're not going to be able to heal. We're not going to be able to expand. We're not going to be able to become the person that we want to be if we're too busy hating who we used to be, okay? You have to have love for yourself. You have to have self-acceptance. You have to have self-forgiveness. You were doing the best that you could in the situation that you were in with the information that you have. And that's all there is to it. You did the best that you could and you're doing better now. And that's all that matters in the end. In the same way that I don't actually know what the truth about sleep paralysis demons is, I don't need to know if I'm right or wrong about the information that I'm going to present to you. Like, do I want to know? I absolutely could go figure it out. Follow whatever you want to get to, right? But it can be enough to simply have space in your brain for that information and then circle back around if and when you get to it. Let's start off with an easy one. Now, in my notes, I wrote down scary mermaids because that is what pops in my head. That is what popped in my head when I was thinking of this example, because I was presented more than once with scary mermaids. And as Marlene likes to say, just because something looks scary doesn't mean it is. Just because something looks bad doesn't mean it is. And so scary mermaids was an interesting one for me because I feel like we've all kind of been tickled in our brain just from the media and stuff about the concept of mermaids being maybe not good, being evil, wanting to drown sailors, things like that, right? So the idea that mermaids were maybe not good beings was kind of already there. But mermaids are always in the media presented more or less as beautiful creatures. And so to be presented more than once with a mermaid that looks terrifying, that is not just like this beautiful, like come siren type of situation to me, was very, very interesting. And it made me check myself. And when I'm presented with scary beings, I still take a moment to check myself, because just because something looks a different way does not make it bad. Just because something looks scary does not actually mean it is here to hurt me. And so scary mermaids was a very interesting one for me, because not only was this mermaid presented in a way that was opposite what I understood, right? Because even if the mermaids were quote unquote evil, this was not a pretty, gorgeous siren type mermaid. This mermaid was scary. It looked terrifying, right? And so I was presented with this idea that mermaids are terrifying, and also that terrifying things could maybe need help. Terrifying things are maybe not just terrifying, but maybe they actually need us to help them as well. And like, okay, that's something that I feel like you hearing now, you're like, well, yeah, of course, maybe they need help. But to be presented with that after having your body be triggered, after having that fear response be triggered, is, again, not a small thing. Let's talk about the Tim Burton realms next. Now, let's get everybody on the same page. The Tim Burton realms are just what I collectively call this kind of group of realms that feels like Tim Burton goes and travels and gets a good amount of his stories from. Because these realms, again, can be very terrifying. And funny enough, I really don't like all of Tim Burton's movies. Some of them actually terrify me, especially the animated ones. I really don't like Tim Burton's animated movies. They make me very physically uncomfortable. And that is maybe perhaps the exact reason why I have been shown these Tim Burton realms in so many different ways. Because not only am I uncomfortable enough, right? I'm noticing that I'm uncomfortable, but I have to be uncomfortable to want to learn to make that change to understand, right? So they make me uncomfortable. And maybe I just needed that little extra push from spirit to show me, to help me expand my understanding of what these realms actually are. And in expanding my concept of what these realms actually are, it actually expanded my concept of the universe as a whole. So let me back up and let me tell you the whole story. There's specifically one Tim Burton realm that I'm going to use as the example in the story. And that's the realm that I explored the most. That's the realm that really gave me this deeper understanding of not just how things can be different, but also why that difference is so important to quite literally the entire universe. Now, in this specific realm, emotions are kind of flipped. And so if you were to, in your little astral travels, go to this realm as a human, like let's say your human brain goes, right? As a human, everybody in this realm is going to feel very, very shitty to you, right? The purpose of this realm, if we looked at it from a human point of view, the purpose of this realm is to be shitty to each other. Now, remember, people, places, all of these things, they can have more than one purpose, right? But we're just going to focus on that one purpose for a second. And the purpose is to be shitty for the sake of balance, right? We always hear there's a balance, a positive, negative, a yin and a yang. The universe, energy, everything, it needs to stay balanced. So, for example, if this is Earth here, there needs to be a counterbalance to Earth in the universe. If you have a realm here, somehow, somewhere, there's a counterbalance to that realm. And this Tim Burton realm, for the sake of this explanation, again, I don't know if this is for real the balance 100% or if this was just them explaining balance to me or whatever, but for the purpose of this Tim Burton realm is the balance to our human realm. One of the reasons that I really love this Tim Burton realm for this example is not just to explain balance to me, but to explain the concept of emotions as energy and needing that emotional energy to be balanced. So here's what that looked like. My little human brain went in astral, got to this Tim Burton realm, and the first thing that I notice when I'm there is these really dirty looks from quite literally every being that looks at me. And I'm talking like I have kicked their dog, I have killed their cat, I blew up their home type of dirty looks. And I just got there. Why do they hate me so much? But the thing is it's not necessarily that they hate me. It's that that was their starting point. That was their common understanding of what was generally accepted within their society. The same way that when we go out in public and we make eye contact with somebody, maybe we give a quick like half smile, maybe we give like a little wave in our car, simple things like that, right? Like they are common courtesies that typically we understand as a society, as a culture, as a country, whatever. Wherever you are, there's common courtesies, right? There's cultural understandings. And the cultural understanding of this Tim Burton realm was to have a shitty, dirty look on your face. And that was the look that you gave everybody. Because if I go into this realm and I give them smiles and I show them happiness and giddiness and joy, not only is that going to feel literally the opposite that it does to me, right? Like that's going to feel shitty to them, but it also threatens the balance of not just their realm, but the counterbalance of our realm. And so if you really have in your brain, like if you are dead set on the idea that these shitty looks mean that they're bad people, not only are you not going to want to go there, but if you do somehow stumble over there and you try to change that, that's a big deal. That actually gets very unsafe very quickly for a lot of beings in the universe because now you are dealing with threatening the balance of the universe. And so this is just one example of many ways that we kind of like cap ourselves or stunt our spiritual growth by not having an open mind, by not having room in our brain for things that we maybe didn't know we knew. Nope, sorry. For things we didn't know we didn't know. That's what I meant. If you don't have room in your brain for things that just blow your mind, right? Like we don't know what we don't know. But if we are so dead set saying, this is the way it is, I'm for sure know this, we are missing out on everything else that is possibly happening in the universe. I talked in circles on that one. I hope it makes sense, but we're gonna keep going. Let's talk about the Fae for our next example. And I use the words the Fae as like a huge umbrella term because there are a million and one different examples of what the Fae actually are. But for the sake of this, I want to use the classical kind of mythology historical sense of the Fae. I'm talking like the Fae have changelings. They steal human babies and they put Fae babies in their place. Or maybe they just steal human babies. Or the Fae have all of these rules where if you go into their realm and you eat their food, you can't return. Or if you tell a Fae your name, they're going to, again, take you into the realm and you can't return. Or all of these million and one almost like fear-based scary stories that we have kind of loosely historically, been taught about the Fae. Let's use this sort of like what if prompt to walk through some of these stories about the Fae. And the first what if that I want to bring to your attention is the reason why we have the stories that we have. So for this example, I'm not talking about other places where like perhaps Ireland, the Fae is more generally accepted as being real in some of those more Celtic homelands, right? So we're just going to talk about the reasons that we have the stories that we have within the United States about the Fae. So why do we have the stories that we have about the Fae, right? Let's just ask ourselves that, for example. Why are stories passed down in the first place? Traditionally, stories can be passed down for a whole bunch of different reasons. We have people who pass down stories within their culture for understanding history, preserving their ancestors, understanding their culture, things like that. But we also have stories passed down that I kind of just call like warning label stories, stories that are there to keep people safe. And one of my favorite examples of this is kind of like stories about the Appalachian Mountains, which are very, very old. And we have a lot of warning label stories about that. For example, if you hear a baby cry in the woods, no, you didn't. You don't whistle in the woods at night. If you hear a being call your name in the woods, no, you didn't, right? Like these are warning labels. These are passed down for the sake of keeping people safe. So what if we have these Fae stories as warning label stories? What does that actually look like? For example, let's say that I don't want my baby to get stolen by the Fae. I need to know a story that tells me what makes a Fae steal a baby in the first place. Let's say that I don't want my kids' baby to get stolen by the Fae. They need to hear the story about what makes the Fae steal babies in the first place. So it's possible, what if the reason that we only have these quote unquote bad stories about the Fae is because the only stories that have been maintained are the stories that have been passed down as these warning label stories? What if we've simply lost all of the ways that the Fae actually helped us in the past, simply for whatever million and one reasons? I say simply, but no, for whatever million and one reasons, we've lost the culture. These warning labels have been the only ones that survive. And that is very typical. Typically, the things that are there to keep us safe or are passed down through some type of fear tend to be the strongest things. What about when you go into the Fae world and you eat food and then the Fae won't let you return? What if the reason the Fae won't let you return is because it's physically unsafe for you to return? What if eating that food changed your molecular structure, your physical structure so much that you can no longer enter into the world that you know? What if it's physically impossible and it's not actually the Fae preventing it and you just can't go back? But what if nobody's ever known why you can't go back, so they just blame the Fae, right? Like there's so many what ifs. What if you coming back after eating Fae food made it so unbalanced that you could possibly upset the balance of the universe? Like what is actually going on for these things to quote unquote happen, right? Like what if it's not actually the way that we think? What if it's actually a good thing packaged with fear? What if it's actually something that is preventing something worse, but we don't know what that worse is, and so we just say that what we know is the bad part? What if? That's all I'm saying. Another sort of like what if Fae scenario that Spirit has presented with me over the years involves seeing things from the Fae point of view. What if humans are actually the quote unquote bad ones, right? Because when we look at things from that 360 view, who's really good and bad? Who's really on the right side? Who's really on the wrong side, right? There's always more than one point of view. So what if it's actually humans that are going in and causing all of these issues, and it's humans that are taking advantage of the Fae? Have you guys seen the Magicians yet? There's one part in the Magicians where the Fae are actually slaves to humans. And when magic goes out, they actually do really, really terrible thing to the Fae, right? And so what if these rules are put in place to protect the Fae? What if humans were going into the Fae realm and causing so many issues that the Fae had to set these rules to keep their own quote unquote people safe, to keep their own Fae safe, right? Like, what if it's actually humans that were causing the issue? Like, surprise, surprise. And I know I said I wanted to keep this second part strictly about spirit stuff, but there is a human issue that I want to talk about, and I will talk about every chance I get, that ties in exactly to this, and that is the term and the concept of black magic being inherently bad, right? So we are getting out of the mindset of good and bad. So just stay with me for a second, okay? When we hear the term black magic, and especially when we hear the term black magic with a very negative connotation, more often than not, we hear it in terms of hoodoo voodoo. And I would like to specifically reference New Orleans voodoo for this example. Now, when we are thinking about things being quote unquote good or bad, please always try to keep in mind the historical and cultural contexts. Can you think of any reason historically that it would have been beneficial for New Orleans practitioners, which are historically Black African Americans? Can you think of any historical reason why it would have been beneficial for them to portray themselves as this very scary, very terrifying, otherworldly, magical being, and even to present themselves in a way that seems quote unquote evil? Can you historically think of any reason why being scary might have been beneficial to African Americans in New Orleans? Can you think of any reason? I'd also like you to just consider who, what, and why presented this concept to you in the first place. What was the first concept of voodoo that you were presented with? Was it an actual person that practices voodoo, or that knows somebody that practices voodoo, or that grew up around it or within the culture? Or was it the media? Was it some random Wicca group? Was it some random person online? And why or how might a certain group benefit from presenting this group as being evil? Or how a certain group might use the concept of the unknown is unsafe, or the unknown is scary, how those ideas could work to oppress other groups. I mean, like, evolutionary wise, it makes sense, right? If you see a cave that is very dark and you don't know what's in it, you maybe don't want to go into it because you don't want to get eaten by a bear or a lion or a wolf or whatever, right? And so, evolutionary, we have this just initial reaction of the unknown is scary, the unknown is unsafe. And certain groups know that and they use that to their advantage. And it's very much on purpose. The last example that I want to give about like this what if kind of reshaping the way that we look at things is a story that I love to tell about the Norse goddess Hel, who is in charge of the afterlife, Helheim. And again, it was through a meditation that I was kind of asking her questions about this mythology story. I will get to it in a second, and I've talked about it before, but I think it's so important because when we stand against the grain, when we stand against what the majority wants, we again are often viewed as the wrong, as the bad. But really, was she really bad? Was she wrong for this? I'm going to give you the overall gist of the story, okay? So the way it played out is there is this god that is so beloved that ends up dying, and he goes to the afterlife of Helheim, which is under Hel's domain. And this god was so beloved that quite literally every being except for one wanted him back. All of the gods went to Hel and said, Hel, we want him back. And Hel said, okay, if all of the beings say that they want him back, I'll let him go back. And all of the beings said, we want him back, except for one who happened to be Loki, who pretended to be somebody else. And he said, no, I don't want him back. And so Hel said, it wasn't all of them. You don't get him back. And you might be thinking, well, we know Loki's a trickster. We know that Loki's the bad one. We know Loki's evil and he causes all of these issues. Why didn't Hel, we're just going to ignore Loki for a second. Why didn't Hel see that also? Why didn't Hel just ignore what Loki said and send this god back anyway? And I asked Hel that. I said, Hel, what the hell is going on? Please explain to me. I want to know your point of view. And I will never forget this story because it is her point of view that is actually, in my opinion, the most important because it factors in what that God actually wanted. At no point in this story did I hear of any of the beings, any of the gods stopping to ask, what the God that died actually wanted. Did he actually want to go back? Did he actually want to stay? Did he want to have a goddamn break for 10 minutes? And what Hell told me is that his wife was there. His wife was in Helheim. His wife was in the afterlife. And he had done his duty. And now he did want to stay with his wife. He had waited for so long to be with her again. And now that he finally was, all of these beings wanted him to go back, but Hell stood up and said, no, because this is his time to rest. This is his chance to recover and to heal and to bond and to be with the person that he loved, that he waited so long to be with again. And so, who is actually the quote unquote bad one in this story? Is it all of the beings that demanded he come back? Did all of these beings say, I don't give a shit what that God wants? We want him back. We don't care. Did they even consider it? Was it Loki? Was it Loki that was the bad one because he said, no, I don't want him back? Or what if Loki actually understood to a deeper level, to a deeper consideration, what the afterlives were for? What it meant for healing, what it meant for resting, what it meant for balance. What if Loki understood things that the rest of the gods weren't considering? Is Hel the bad one for not understanding that Loki's just trying to be a jackass? Was Hel the bad one for holding to her understanding of her role? Because really her role was there. Her role is to be the protector, to hold the realm, to offer what is needed for the afterlife, right? That was her role. Was she truly the bad one for doing what her job was? Who's the real quote unquote bad one in the story? And before I could even be in a place where I was ready to hear Hell's side of the story, I had to have an understanding of not just like what mythology is, not just what the gods are, but I had to have an understanding that was expanded past what is offered on the human level. You guys know my views of like why the gods exist and the energy vortexes and kind of gods being a job and like all of this crazy stuff, right? And that is way beyond what just like the human mythology teaches us. And so I had to have space in my brain for an understanding that was outside of what is commonly understood to be the gods. And I not only had to have space in my brain for an expanded view of what the gods are, but I had to have space in my brain for different points of view on the same situation. And it's very possible that if I was so dead set on this is who Hel is, and she's nothing more and she's nothing less, Hel probably wouldn't have even taken the time to not even tell me the story, but to even come talk to me in the first place. And so, in the end, I'm just going to reiterate to close it off, leave space in your brain. Know that we don't know what we don't know. Don't try to force things to fit. Leave space in your brain so that more information can come, even if you don't understand it, even if it makes you a little bit afraid. Take that information, take it all in, and use it to transcend this duality. Use it to create this larger understanding of not just yourself, not just of the world that you live in, but of existence as a whole. Know that there's always more than one side to the story. Know that there's that huge 360 view of the situation and that things are not always as they first appear.